upgrading to Bahmni standard 1.0. So I'll quickly brief over the agenda, the topics that we are going to cover. So our first topic is going to be a quick recap on running Bahmni using Docker. Then we would see what are all the preparations that we need to do for the upgrade. Then next would be what are the different options that is possible when you are running Bahmni standard 1.0 for the databases. And then we'll talk about the MySQL 8.0 upgrade, which is coming in along with this Bahmni standard 1.2 release. And then a small quick brief on Odoo upgrade. What does it mean for an existing implementer migrating to Bahmni standard and what versions are supported? The next topic is going to be a hands-on as well as a demo. So wherein we would be covering about how to use your implementation specific config with standard 1.0 on Docker. And then we will have a demo on restoring an existing backup into Bahmni standard. Right. So let's get started. Yeah, quick recap of running Bahmni using Docker. So Bahmni Dockerization initiative has been started at around 2 years back, and we started with the EMR components and each of the components one by one. And last year, same time, we released Bahmni Live, which was with Docker and Kubernetes as well. And now we have the Bahmni standard, which is supported on Docker Compose, and Helm charts would follow soon. Yeah. So as a prerequisite for running Bahmni on Docker, the tools required would be Git, Docker, and Docker Compose. And now with the latest releases of Docker, when you install the Docker engine, it comes with the Docker Compose plugin as well. So there is no additional instructions or installation steps that is needed to install Docker Compose. Yeah, then the next would be picking the right Compose profile. So your existing implementation, or if you are starting with a fresh implementation, you might be thinking, okay, how do I selectively run few services? For example, okay, for my implementation, I need only the EMR and the lab pieces, or maybe you can say, I need the EMR and the Odoo integrated, not the lab. So in that case, that's when Compose profiles helps us to allow the selection of the services to be started. There are different Compose profiles that we had created in our Docker Compose configuration, and you can also add your new profiles if needed. So some of the profiles include EMR, which brings in all the EMR related components. This includes our Bahmni's OpenMRS distribution, the Bahmni UI, which is the Bahmni is built from Bahmni apps, and then the appointments module. All those are brought from the using the EMR profile. Then we have an OpenLS profile, which brings in the lab specific components, OpenLS and its associated database. Then we have Odoo, which is for the billing and inventory management integrated system. Or if you say, okay, I want the entire suite, I'm not selectively running anything, you can also use a profile called as Bahmni standard. This would bring the entire suite of Bahmni standard on a single run. And you can also maybe think, okay, now I would want to start with EMR first. Later, can I start with OpenLS? Yeah, you can start with that as well. And the atom feed sync can sync at any point of time whenever you start. So it's up to you first to decide on which is the Compose profile that I'm going to run. If you are an existing implementation, you might know, okay, these are all the services that we are running and we want to get started with this. Then the next we have documentations, and we had did detailed training sessions before on how to run Bahmni using Docker, what are all the different configurations, environment variables possible. So we highly recommend you go through these documentations as well. And let me quickly move on. Yeah, so coming to the preparations for upgrade. So basically now all our previous Bahmni releases used to happen on a CentOS base. Now with Docker, it allows you to run on any OS that you have. It can be a Linux based machine, it can be a Windows, or it can be a Mac based machine as well. So now as we are using Docker as the base for Bahmni, we recommend getting familiarized with different Docker commands. So there are different materials available out over the internet. You can refer to YouTube or some cheat sheets to get a good handhold of the Docker commands. And in order to assist new implementers starting with Bahmni on Docker, we also have a script which is run bahmni.sh that is available in our Bahmni Docker repository. That you can run that script also, and it would prompt you for the options. Maybe it would say, okay, can I start my services? Can I restart a specific service? How to get the logs of a specific service? You can also use that script, which abstracts all the Docker commands that is running behind the screen. And then understanding the Bahmni Docker repository. So the Bahmni Docker repository has a structuring wherein the Docker Compose files are grouped for Bahmni standard separately and Bahmni Lite separately. You have different .env files that you can configure. And then there are backup and restore scripts that is available in a Bahmni Docker repository. We'll quickly see a a walkthrough of the repository as well. Let me bring it up. Yeah, so this is our Bahmni Docker repository, wherein you have at least these are the two major folder directories that I would say. One is Bahmni Lite, which is curated specifically for Bahmni Lite. The services are added, and then we have Bahmni Standard. So this is where you would have all the shoots of Bahmni Standard. So here, if we see, we have the Docker compose.yaml file, which hosts all the services. So we can see we have the logging configuration, which followed by the services. So we have the proxy service, config, OpenLS, and then this goes on. We have the services configured. And as I mentioned before, we can see that this is how the profile association has happened. So for example, we have OpenLS, and if we see the profile associated is with OpenLS, and we also have a Bahmni standard profile. So now you can bring up OpenLS either with the OpenLS profile alone, which would bring just OpenLS and its associated database service, or you can bring the entire suite of Bahmni standard as well. Yeah, in the same way, different other services also exist. And then we have the env file. So basically that env file will have the release tags associated. Once we announce a formal release, this would pinpoint to all the specific release tag, and then we have a .env.dev. So which would be our pointing to latest from all the image builds would happen from the mainline. So if you want to try out the latest version, you can use the env.dev file. If you want to try out a specific release version, you can use with the .env file. And then also you can create similar files. For example, maybe if you are setting up a pre-prod or a prod environment and you want to set up specific credentials also, you can just duplicate this file, update whatever configuration environment that needs to be done. So for example, you might be updating, you must update the atom feed user and atom feed password credentials when you're setting up a production environment. So in that case, you can create a prod environment file and manage all those credentials, secrets, everything from there. Yeah. And as I mentioned, this is a run Bahmni.sh script, which gives you the options to run Bahmni without using the Docker command. This gives an aggregation for it. You can use that. Maybe I can just quickly show. I'll go to the Bahmni standard directory. So you can say /run Bahmni.sh. Yeah. So here, if we see, this would give us all the options. Okay. How do I start the Bahmni services? How do I stop Bahmni? You can just specify the option over here. So if I say 0 status of all services, it would list me what are all the containers that are running. So you can use the script to manage your instance of Bahmni. Or if you want to use specific Docker commands, you can use those Docker commands as well. Okay. Let's move back. Yeah. Now, once you have this Docker repository, then next would be you need to plan for the additional hardware that would be required to do the upgrade. So since this upgrade is not going to be like, say, okay, can I update the binaries in place? It is going to be a full backup and restore upgrade. So we recommend running Bahmni on a separate instance so that your daily business use cases, production use cases are not affected. In the meantime, you can do all the setup on an additional hardware and then do a backup of your existing instance and get it restored. So this would require additional hardware to be procured or to be arranged for the while during the upgrade. And then next, as usual, for any upgrades, we highly recommend setting up a tester pre-prod environment. And with this upgrade, we recommend it specifically because this upgrade involves two major things, I would say. One is the MySQL upgrade, wherein your database will get upgraded to a newer version of MySQL. Previously, we used to run either with 5.6 or 5.7. Now it is going to run with MySQL 8. And the other important significant piece is the OpenMRS. So as we all know, Bahmni is based on OpenMRS, and we have added all the modules on top of it, and Bahmni has built a distribution of OpenMRS. Now, over the last year, there was an upgrade where we migrated the OpenMRS that we are using from 2.1 to 2.5. So now Bahmni comes out of the box with 2.5.12 of the OpenMRS platform. So since that may include few updates to the schema and everything, once you go live with the production 2.5.12 with the latest releases, it would be difficult to roll back to the older version. So we highly recommend setting up a tester pre-prod environment, verifying all your critical flows, any custom modules that you have, test it out, and then going ahead with the actual production upgrade. Yeah, the next thing that we want to highlight is about the restore timeline and plan based on the data volume. So in your existing implementations, you would have been using Bahmni for a certain amount of time, and the amount of data that has been captured over time would be large. So it depends on your implementation, how many users, the number of patients, and even like say other artifacts. For example, document images, patient images, fax images, uploaded results. So all those needs to be migrated from the older version to the newer version, which could take a significant amount of time. As an example, in one of the implementations that we had did the upgrade, the OpenMRS DB restore itself took around 4 hours. So we highly recommend planning out the timeline and when you want to go live and start the upgrade as early as possible. Yeah. So before I move on, any questions or thoughts? Okay, all right. Move on. Yeah, the next option is options for running the databases of Bahmni components. So right now, the default option that comes out of the box with Bahmni is running the database containers also on the same host. So this is the out of the box configuration that we ship with Docker, wherein the associated database services also run on the same Docker Compose node. But maybe depending on the load or depending on the configurations that you have, or due to few regulatory requirements, you might be requested to run the database on a separate host. So in that case also that is possible. You can also run database on a separate on-premise host, which can be configured on the Docker Compose itself. Or another option could be you can use provided services from cloud providers. Example, okay, maybe I want to use RDS, I want to use Google Cloud Database or Azure Database. So that is also possible. Let me quickly show you. Yeah. So as we all know, every component that we use in Bahmni depends on a database service. As an example, let's take OpenMRS. So if we see here, OpenMRS service needs a database. So that is available as a service over here. OpenMRS DB is the service that we had configured, and it has an image and it has a dependency on OpenMRS. Now let's say, okay, I'm running a DB on a separate server. I want to configure it separately. Yes, sure, that is possible. So every service would have these four environment variables. One would be the OpenMRS DB host name. The other would be DB username and DB password and the DB name. So these four parameters allow you to configure where should your application connect to the database. And these values are available in the .env or .env.dev file. So if we take and if we scroll down to the OpenMRS environment variable section, we can see there is an OpenMRS DB host. So by default, it points to OpenMRS DB, which is the service name within the Docker Compose configuration itself. Now, let's say I want to run it on an external server. Maybe as an example, let's say my server is running at some IP like this. So I can say, okay, my database's IP is here, and you can configure your database host here. And then next, maybe you want to say, okay, I want to use a different username, and you need to change your password as well. So you can update all these variables here, and automatically your application will start connecting to the database on this specific host. So same case, if you are using a provided service and you want to connect it to there, you can update the URL, the specific host URL over here, and the application would start connecting. So similarly, for all the services, even if you take, for example, Odoo. Odoo has DB host, username and password, and OpenLS also supports all these configurations. So in your existing implementation, maybe you have been already running the database on a separate server and you don't want to disturb that. Your database stays on that server. Yeah, sure. You can go ahead and run it in the same way. Just make sure to update these variables and you can comment out this service. As you are not going to run OpenMRS DB on Docker, you can comment out the service and make the service talk to the external database server as well. So this is one of the configuration that is possible via the .env files in the Docker Compose. Yeah. Then, yeah. So now with that said, for databases, there are these options possible. And now starting with this release, Bahmni will be shipping with MySQL 8.0 as the base version, as the default version for the MySQL databases. So Bahmni uses MySQL database for OpenMRS and the report service. Now, what was the need for our upgrade to go to MySQL 8 is that now most of the cloud providers has removed the support for MySQL 5.7, and even if they support, it's at a hefty charge that comes associated with it. They have extended support plans, but it's too costly. So we started with the analysis of the MySQL 8. So most of the queries and things we have in Bahmni right now are compatible with MySQL 8 as well. But we have identified few areas which needed a refactoring or which has an performance impact. So those has been fixed, and those fixes are part of the Bahmni standard release as well. So one such impact that we saw was the only full group by. So starting with MySQL 8, there is an SQL mode called as only full group by. So this only full group by restricts wherein all the select fields that we use should be part of the group by class. And also if you are using any order by, that should be part of the select class as well. So since this is going to impact different queries, different reporting queries, for this release, for this standard 1.2 release, we are releasing it with a workaround wherein this only full group by SQL mode is disabled. So using an environment variable for the OpenMRS DB service, we are disabling the only full group by mode so that our existing queries will work as is. And then one other place that we identified is that the ADT word list queries had a performance impact. And then on analysis, we found that there are few places which can be optimized. So now with the Bahmni core module, there is an optimized version of the query available, and that would automatically replace your existing ADT word list queries. So an important point to note here is this would automatically, when you migrate your database, restore your database from the older version to the newer version, this would update the ADT word list query. But now, depending on your implementation, you may have customized this ADT word list query to show additional information or to restrict few information. If that is the case, if you are seeing, okay, I'm missing information or an additional information, we recommend you compare your SQL query on an existing instance, and then you can add the variable so that the optimized query gets executed. You need to refactor that query accordingly. Yeah. And then one another impact that we saw was MySQL 8.0 comes with binary logging enabled by default, due to which we have seen that the stored procedure creation requires a super privilege. So anyways, while during the restoration, the database restore happens with the root user. So all the restore and store procedures should get restored from your backup file. But if you see any error saying that there is a super privilege missing, there are workarounds to resolve this. I'll quickly show the documentation as well. Yeah, so we have this upgrading to MySQL 8 page, and we have documented all the analysis and fixes that we had done. So if we see, there is this point wherein the store procedure creation requires a super privilege. So if that is the case, if you want to create a store procedure, or if your implementation uses any custom liquid based configuration which creates a store procedure, then you may need to enable the super privilege to the user. Since adding a super privilege to the user gives extensive access to the database, instead we recommend following this temporary approach, wherein this can be executed, log binary trust function creators. So this can be a temporary change that you can run on your existing MySQL shell, and this would allow the database application user like OpenMRS user to create the store procedure. And once the store procedure creation is done, you can just restart the database service again, and this privilege would be removed automatically. Yeah. And then next is compatibility with MySQL 5.6 or 5.7. Yeah. So all the components, application drivers are still compatible with 5.6 or 5.7. You can continue to run on a MySQL 5.6 or a 5.7 version. So how this would help you is maybe, okay, as I said before, I'm running on a database already. My database is so huge. I don't want to migrate right now to MySQL 8. Yeah, sure. So in that case, you can still continue to run with MySQL 5.7 or even 5.6 for some time. But we highly recommend migrating to MySQL 8 because all our future releases or upgrades and the security patches are not available for MySQL 5.6 or 5.7. Before I move on, any questions or someone wants to add on something? Okay, all right. And let me quickly move on to Odoo upgrade. Yes. So another significant upgrade that happens with the standard release is the Odoo upgrade. So as we all know now, Odoo 16 LTS is the version that is shipped out of the box with Bahmni standard 1.0. And our recommendation is to migrate to Odoo 16. But since this can take some time and you need to think about all the financial year translation, like migrations and about patient data, stock data when you want to do a cutoff and plan on the new system, we still have Odoo 10 available on our Docker Compose configuration. So Odoo 10 is also Dockerized initially, and we had it with our Docker Compose. So that is still going to continue to exist for a couple of more releases on our Docker Compose configurations, so that you can move from the CentOS based older version of Bahmni installations to Docker versions with a DB restore. So you don't need to do any migrations to Odoo 16. You can still come with a DB restore, but please be informed that there would be no security patches or upgrades that would be released for Odoo 10. So we are shipping with Odoo 10 images and its respective configurations as well. You can bring it up with the Odoo 10 profiles. But we don't manage the Odoo 10 image anymore. We don't support, or there is also no support from the Odoo community as well. The base image itself is deprecated. So we are just using the existing image. Okay, so the next topic is how to upgrade to standard 1.0 if you are already running on Docker. So on the community, we have seen few implementers have already started using Docker, using specific images, or using they had forked Bahmni Docker and started with their implementation. So if you are already running on Docker and if you want to migrate to Bahmni standard 1.0, so the first step would be you need to update the image tags for the services. So once we do a formal release, all our image tags would be pinned with tag 1.0 or specific versions depending on the component, and then a distro will be published. Once that happens, you would see that specific images are available on the Docker Hub. So you would need to update the image tags for the service. Next would be upgrading your MySQL. So you could have started already. So wherein the default configuration for standard was MySQL 5.6. So now the next step would be you need to upgrade the database container to MySQL 8. So that is also already documented, which I shown before. And the next would be adding any additional configurations to your implementation specific configuration to leverage the new features. For example, IPD features are coming in new, the appointments features, OT features. While we had made all the configurations backward compatible, if the configuration doesn't exist, you would see Bahmni working the same way that worked before. But if you want to get the new feature into your implementation, you need to add the additional configurations. So specifically on the image tag part, how can you update is that? So as an example, if we see, this is how our beta is pinned. So usually we used to have latest over here. So now in your implementation, if you are running with latest already, we recommend using a specific image tags like this. Okay, what is the version of a config image? What is the version of OpenLS image tag and so on. Yeah, so for our release based on the component, the specific tags would differ, and that would be available on our release notes so that you can take and pin the specific tags to your implementation. Yeah. Okay. So before I move on to the next slide, any questions? Cool. I'll take that as a no. Let me move ahead. Yeah. So the next topic is building a custom Bahmni distro. So if your implementation, maybe you might be using any additional modules, or you want to use a specific set of different modules. Yeah, I think we have a hand raised. Anish, yeah, please go ahead.
Currently, we are using MySQL 5.6 and Bahmni 0.92, but at the moment we are unable to migrate to MySQL 8. So can we use MySQL 5.6 Docker image?
Yes, you can use, but you can also migrate to MySQL 8 because the default
Hello,
migrations.
Am I audible?
Yes, Anish, we can hear you.
Hello. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, Mohan, both of you are audible. Yes.
Yeah. So
Anish, can you hear me?
yeah, I can hear. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, so currently we are using Bahmni 0.92 and MySQL 5.6, but at the moment we are unable to migrate to MySQL 8. So can we use MySQL 5.6 Docker image at the moment?
Yes, you can use MySQL 5.6 Docker image, but that would have few security vulnerabilities. Just make sure to add proper firewall rules so that your DB is not exposed out.
Okay, right. So other than security concern, like do we need to consider some other aspect while migrating this 5.6 Docker image using MySQL Docker image?
No, our Bahmni, all the application components, the queries are already compatible with 5.6, 7 or MySQL 8.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Got it.
Yeah. And also a note here, now our migration guide, the upgrade guide automatically by default guides you to use MySQL 8. So even if you have a MySQL 5.6 backup, you can give a try on MySQL 8. When you do restore, the restore process automatically migrates you to MySQL 8. So you can verify if it works fine with MySQL 8, then you should be able to go ahead with MySQL 8 itself. Because anyways, you are going to do a database backup and restore on the new hardware.
Okay, I have some questions. Yeah, we have just restored database from 9 to the Docker version MySQL 8, but we got the errors, some of the liquidity errors. So we raised the question over here, and we have somehow installed Bahmni in the 13 sites hospitals, and we need to
Anish,
migrate
if you are
the data.
speaking, your voice is very low.
Yeah, so we tried this one, like we tried migrating our databases following your documentation, Bahmni documentation from MySQL 5.6 to 8, but we get some liquid-based error. So like so we got
Okay.
liquid-based error. So like, do we need to consider something to mitigate those errors?
Maybe I'm not sure of the exact error. Maybe you post it on community, or you can post it on a talk thread, or if you had posted, we can take a look and then help you out on the specific errors.
Not only the
And also, you should not migrate directly from 5.6 to MySQL 8. It should be a step-by-step process. You should first come to 5.7 and then to MySQL 8.
Okay, we just need to migrate the data to, like we have the data of the patients since 2000, somehow 4-5 years of data in the Bahmni 992, and we need to migrate that data to the Docker. So for that process, like a direct restore will work or not. Some we have tried also on the process for restore, but we got the error on the liquid.
Sure.
From
Maybe you can post it, start a talk thread. We can get that discussed over there.
okay, sure. I'll post on the
And we will
open stuff.
Okay, and we will also try to first migrate to 5.7 and then to 8. And then we
Sure.
will post the error there. Thanks.
Thank you. Right. Any other questions or thoughts?
And excuse me, like we have one more questions. So actually we are also planning to like completely migrate on Docker and use Docker. So, but we have DHIS2 module and insurance integration module as well. So do Bahmni have planned like to make Docker image of DHIS and insurance integration like in the future?
I think that's specific to our implementation. Currently, we don't have that planned in our roadmap.
Like we have done this project through the Bahmni project. We have from the Possible Health, and we have I think we have done the documentation too on the wiki Bahmni and DHS2 integration.
Sorry, we couldn't hear you properly.
Bahmni and insurance integration. Right now we are on the full phase on the 9.2. We have integrated those two components too, and we need to convert that images DHS2 and insurance integration. So if there are any wikis, so we can follow also, that will be so helpful.
Anish, sorry, we can't hear you properly. Is that only for me or for others as well?
So am I audible now?
Yes,
You
you
are.
So actually, like Bahmni implementation was done by Bahmni team with the help of Possible, and it was implemented like few years back. So, and it was in DHIS2, specifically DHIS2 was implemented by the help of Bahmni. That's why we are looking for some support. Like if Bahmni could help us in in making Bahmni Docker images of DHIS2 and insurance integration. Just we are looking for the support if possible.
Sure. Please post your queries on talk thread. I think we can discuss it over there about the external additional services. We can give you guidance, and if you have the capacity, you can Dockerize those services. And if it fits the Bahmni products roadmap, we can get it into Bahmni. Or you can still publish those images under your namespace and then use it with the Docker Compose. You can add as many services as you need.
Okay, thank you so much. We will contact later for this one for additional support. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. Cool. And let me move on. Yeah. So next comes the building a custom Bahmni distro. Yeah. So as we had discussed just now, this could be like say, okay, at your specific implementation, you might be using an additional OMAD, or you may have a customized version of the Bahmni OMAD that is already shipped. So in that case, how do you build a custom distro of Bahmni? So OpenMRS, for building the OpenMRS image, we highly recommend using the Bahmni's image as the base image and then add your additional OMADs or replace your existing OMADs as needed. So as an example, let me quickly show you the India distro build that we have. So if we see here, this is our Bahmni India distro build, which is curated specifically for Bahmni India. So how it happens is this uses Bahmni's product image as the base. So this starts with Bahmni slash OpenMRS image. And on top of this, an additional OMAD is added to bring in the additional functionalities of Bahmni India. So HIP module is added, and then some additional properties files are added. So in this way, if you want to add an additional OMAD and build your own distribution, you can write a simple Docker file like this, wherein you would base Bahmni's distro image as your base and then add or replace an existing OMAD. So this would help you build your custom distributions. Or if you are supporting multiple implementations, you can even build implementation specific distributions like this. So this is on the OpenMRS distro. Next, one another component in Bahmni that supports a modular structure is the Odoo modules. So for Odoo, there are different ways to extend Odoo's functionalities. So by default, we ship with the bare minimum sales module, purchase module, and the inventory module. But in your implementation, you can use additional modules that are supported by Odoo. So as we all know, Odoo has an app store from which you can download additional add-ons and use it. So if you are using an additional add-on, either you can do a volume mode, or the other option could be, so okay, maybe I want to customize something that Bahmni is already shipping. If you want to add a new feature to the existing modules or something, you can also build a custom image from the Bahmni Odoo modules repository. So Bahmni-Odoo modules is for Odoo 16, and we have the same repo for Odoo 10 as well. A different repo with Odoo modules as the name. And then also there are few community add-ons that are available, that are bundled along with the Odoo 16 image, which you can install. So these would be by default not installed, but it's optional if you want to use. So one such example here is the accounting module. So with Odoo 16, accounting module is not available on the community version by default. So the team has analyzed and added a community module from Odoo community from the Cypress Technologies, and accounting module is added. But this would not be installed by default, but it's up to the implementer to install and try out and see if it fits their use cases. So on the mounting part, we can do something like, say, if I quickly show you on the Docker. Yeah. So if we look here, for the Odoo service, we have the extra Odoo add-ons for. So maybe on your host, you can have your extra add-ons on a specific folder. You can collate all your extra add-ons on a specific folder, and you can specify the path on the .env file. So by default, it points to the same folder, /extra add-on. So you will see there is a folder created like this. Either you can pull your modules, extract it here on the same folder, or you can mount it to a different path. If you're on your host, if you have it mounted on a loaded on a different path, you can update the path in the variable and Odoo would start reading it from there. The other option, as I mentioned, is customizing it. So you should do this only when you want to customize something on what Bahmni ships already. So you can uncomment the specific path and you can provide where is my Bahmni Odoo modules exist. Yeah, so these are the different options on how you can build a custom distribution of Odoo 16. Or you can say you can also build a custom image out of the Bahmni Odoo modules repository. So let me quickly show you that as well. So this is our modules repo wherein different modules are added and we have a packaging. So how this packaging happens is we can see that we are using the Odoo's base image as a base for our Bahmni image, and we are just copying all our additional OMADs. So now you can say, okay, I want to add an additional OMAD along with Bahmni. So as we did for OpenMRS, you can also use Bahmni's as a base image. So for example, you can say Bahmni/Odoo 16 as the base and add the additional modules that you want and then publish it to Docker Hub and use it across your implementations. So in this way, you can also build an extended version of the Odoo image as well. Yeah. Any questions here? Or I'm sure if someone wants to add on something.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so I have a question regarding the how to set master password. So if we see that on non-dockerized Odoo setup, which is Odoo 10, there the master password is set on odoo.conf file. And
Okay.
whereas on Dockerized version, there is no password configured at present. So community will be handling those issues?
Sure, you can raise it on a talk thread, but I think by now Odoo allows you to set it on the UI. When you first start with Odoo, it prompts you for a master password.
Correct, but if we restart Odoo service, no, that password goes. So again, it sets to default. So as a security concern, I raise this question.
Sure, yeah, we'll handle this. We'll take a look at this and add the necessary configuration in element.
Okay, thanks.
Just to add to that, we have the image that we bundle, right, for Odoo, that does have a conf file, an odoo.conf file. So before you build the image, you can, if you want to set it from the conf file, you can head over to the image and the repo there and set it on the image. Edit the file and then build the image yourself. So that way you'll have the master password set up from the conf itself. I hope that answers your question. I can share the link for that file as well.
I think Mohan had shared while explaining like Bahmni Odoo modules, right? That repository.
Yeah.
Yes, this one. So this is the exact file, and you'll find the odoo.conf file here and here under package/doc.
Okay, we'll see. Thank you.
Right. You'll have to bundle the image yourself, but apart from that, this is where you can edit it. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Right. Any other questions? Okay. I think Rahul, do you want to take it over?
Sure. Sure, Mohan, I can share my screen.
Thank you.
And I also hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Okay. So with that, we'll start with how to. Thanks, Mohan. So with that, we'll get started on how to use your current implementation specific config. And as you all know, Bahmni follows a configuration mechanism which allows implementers to modify most parts of Bahmni UI through JSON config files. And there are two ways of using implementation specific configuration with Docker. So one way is to get this done via a volume mounting. And this is helpful for development testing and allows you to quickly modify and validate changes. This can also be used in a single instance development on premise. So let me just quickly show you how that is done. Right. So here, if you see, I have my Bahmni Docker and Bahmni standard setup ready. And let me just give you a quick demo on how to get this done by making a few changes to the Bahmni homepage. For that, let's head over to the Bahmni Docker, Bahmni standard folder, and then I'll just open that in my code editor. A couple of things you'll have to configure. One would be to add the standard config file path and file path in the env file, and then comment out the Bahmni config service in the Docker Compose file. And for that, let me just quickly find the right. So I have my standard config folder here inside program/Bahmni. And to get my path, let me just quickly copy this, add it here in line number 40, wherein we have the config volume defined. So let me just replace this with the file path. And inside Docker Compose, we have this service called Bahmni config. Let me just quickly comment all of this out. Right, and with that you should be all set. Let me just quickly spin up Bahmni. Right, since I'm using env, since I've mostly changed my env file, I'll use that one. And let's see. So I'll start my Bahmni service. I have all the images pulled, so there won't be a pull that happens, and in a minute I have all my services up. So here, if you see, I have all the containers and services up. I have the basic profile set up. So if you see, the profile will now be pointing to EMR, and I can see all the EMR related services up. And right. So now to change the files. So for that, let's head over to standard config, and here in the editor of your choice, you can make a few changes. So mainly just open standard.config, and I hope the font size is all right. And here inside white label.json, you can see that there is a home page, and inside of which there is a header text, and there is this header text that is defined. So let me just quickly change this to Bahmni training, capital T. Right. Let me just save this and head over to my browser of choice. Right. My config is up. I have config volume defined.
I think Rahul, you are using a different env file. Your update is on .dev.
Oh, right. Really sorry. Things to remember, I guess. This is something you should be sure about. Thanks, Mohan. So let me just bring down everything once again and try this again.
You can do an up again. It should recreate your container.
Right. Right. Now you can see that the files are getting updated, and all the containers that got created have the standard config mounted now. So let me just head over to my browser and do a quick reload. Now you can see that the header text is now a bit different. So earlier you saw that it said welcome to Bahmni EMR and other profiles, but now it says Bahmni training, which is what I have configured in here. So this is a basic example of how you can like volume mount your implement a specific configurations to Bahmni. And any questions there? Right. So I'll move on to the next
Yeah,
step. Yes, Mohan.
Sorry, Rahul, just want to add on here. So the reason that we had to comment to the Bahmni config service, so that's very important. Or else what happens is when the service spins up, when the config service spins up, it would override your existing config. So if you are using a volume mounted config, then make sure to comment out the Bahmni config service. So because now as you are supplying all the configurations from your local mount, you don't need to necessarily run the config service from the Docker image. So that's a point to be noted over here.
Thanks, Mohan. I hope you don't have any questions. Right, we'll move on to the second approach. So the second approach would be to build your own custom image, and this is recommended for production environments. This is quite helpful in cloud deployment and CI/CD, where there is a team working on setting up the configurations. And for this, we'll be relying on Docker and Dockerfile. So for folks who aren't familiar with Docker, Docker is a tool that allows you to package your application and its dependencies into a container, which you can run consistently on any environment. And a Docker file is a text file that contains a series of instructions on how to build a Docker. So let me just show you the Docker file for Bahmni standard. It should be here. So here, if you head over to standard config, you will see that there is a folder called package, inside of which there is Docker and then the Docker file. This is the Docker file that we'll be building, we'll be relying on to build the Bahmni config. And so let me just share a generic command for this one. Right. So here is a generic command for building a Docker image, building any Docker image from a Docker file. I'll just copy it onto my screen. This is a generic command. I'll just paste it here in chat as well. Right. And in our case, so as to build the Bahmni config from the standard config folder, we'll run this from the root of the repository. This is very important, as you have to be on the root of the repository before you run the command. Let me just quickly run the Bahmni config specific command as well. And this would take less than a minute. And in the meantime, let me just, so now you can see that the image is already up. And I have the new local image setup. So I've called it Bahmni config local, and the image is built. And this is the SHA associated. And now that the image is built, we can publish it and use it on any machine. For this, the options include you can push it to Docker Hub, the Amazon ECR, which is Elastic Container Registry, or Google Container Registry and other private registries. So these are options where you can like publish your custom images and then use those on your environments. Any questions there? Right. And back to the slide. And another thing that we have to be conscious about would be the right. Another thing that we have to be conscious about would be the changes that needs to be done on existing configs. So if we head over to this slide, we can see that we've mentioned a note for the implementers that is on the changes, breaking changes. So one would be the reports, Bahmni reports SQL path. In CentOS-based installations, the path for custom SQL queries is as follows. But with the Docker setup, we've mounted it to this path in the reports container. So we can replace the value of SQL attributes in report.json to start with this file path rather than war/www/bahmni config. And another major breaking change would be the liquid-based migrations for OpenMRS. In CentOS-based Bahmni installations, adding custom liquid-based migrations for OpenMRS was done through the Bahmni config/OpenMRS/migrations. But the Dockerized setup and upgraded OpenMRS, OpenMRS module initializer module is packaged with the distribution. So new liquid-based migrations to be added in can be mounted to master data / configuration / liquid-based directly in the Bahmni config. Right. And another thing that we have to be conscious about would be setting up the time zones. So this is a major change that has come up since the Bahmni Lite release, and this would help you with setting up time zones, setting up containers that is specific to a particular time zone. And for that, you can head over to Bahmni Docker. Let me just quickly show that. Right. So here inside Bahmni Docker, let me just open my editor. And here, if you see, there is a environment variable to set the time zone for the containers, which is TZ variable. And you need to specify the time zone in the database format. And by default, it will be set to UTC. And you can switch it to any time zone that you want. For example, if you want to set the time zone to New York, which is East Standard Time, need to set the time zone to New York, America, to say America/New York. For India, you can set the TZ to Asia/Kolkata. Right. So if you're on India and you want the containers to be on India specific time, you can use this time zone configuration. And if it's Kenya, it's Africa and Nairobi. To learn more about the time zone configurations, you can head over to this link provided in the chat. I've pasted the link. So if anyone wants to read more about the Bahmni time zone configuration, you can head over to this link. And it is also available as part of the deck as well. Right. Any questions there?
Hello, this is Ashok here.
Yes, Ashok.
In your previous step of the OpenMRS config, right?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, Ashok. You're audible.
If I have an existing CentOS configuration, what changes would I have to? How do I bring it in to create a custom config image? It's a little unclear on that.
To build a custom image, is it?
Custom config image, right? I mean, that's you recommended it as the second step. I'm sorry, I'm going back to the earlier step.
No worries. So
Yeah,
we
you
recommend
said
for a
changes needed
production
to
environment.
existing config, right?
Yes. So for the production,
you had a OpenMRS specific changes. Now, if I have an existing CentOS changes to my config there. So I obviously copy the config file from the existing CentOS application, right?
Right.
So that has its own dependencies. So
Right.
if I'm migrating that into the Docker setup, are you going to cover that later? This is a good
Actually, no, actually, I wasn't planning on covering it, but my advice would be to refer to the standard config repo that we have right now. So there is a let me just quickly take you over to standard config. Standard config. Right. This is a new repo that we have configured just for the Bahmni standard release. And if you head over to Bahmni standard release, this would be almost on par with the standard config folder that you have for your CentOS system. And the only thing you have to be mindful would be on the file structure. So Bahmni, as you know, follows a particular file structure for its config parts. So if you stick onto the same file paths, and if you want to make maybe implementation specific, you might have a specific implementation. Say you might have changed a couple of things on the OpenMRS apps.
So I have added lots of
You want
concepts
to
and all that,
bring.
right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I've
Sorry?
added new concepts in my previous installation. So those concept changes also come in here, don't they?
Yes.
As JSON files, right?
Yes, if you've added it as CSV files, I'm not sure how you've added those concepts.
Right.
So
I mean, this was much earlier to the forms interface. So I had a lot of concepts that we had added.
Hi, Ashok.
Yeah.
Hi, Ashok. Yeah. So if there are multiple things, okay. So I'm assuming that you would be restoring your databases, right?
Exactly.
Which means that you are not going to lose any data that are already there. Now, relevant to the concepts, there are also front-end configurations that influence that.
Right.
If you are using your existing configuration, all right, let's say you have taken, probably that time it was default config, maybe you had forked from there, added your own configurations. If you are using your existing configurations, in most of the cases, that should work without any problem. How do you use this? Either you volume mount, for example, what Rahul just showed, or if you want to say, okay, I'm going to manage it better, maybe version it, whichever way. For example, you can even use, you can even create an image out of it and push it to a Docker registry. Like, for example, Docker Hub. If you want a private registry, you can choose other options as well. But if you're saying I already have the config with me, I'm just going to use it. Our simple suggestion would be just volume mount.
Okay.
Now, starting Bahmni standard release, you see we are also started using, which is carried forward actually from Bahmni Lite, is actually better, and you can say more features as part of the configuration setup, right? Uh, for example, the way that we load data, right? So we provide a CSV-based automatically it will import, for example, and these follow a particular directory structure. If you are coming from an older configuration, most likely you would not have this. But if you are going to add henceforward, our recommendation would be see the example and then add whatever things you need incrementally.
In terms of the CSV files, is it?
CSV files.
JSON files.
Exactly. So that configuration now becomes like a package for you, right?
Right. I mean, that's the ideal situation that in future you want Docker compatible configuration actually.
Exactly. So you can then maintain your configuration either in a GitHub or even privately some repository. Our advice would be to make things just simpler, and especially if you have requirement for distributing this across multiple sites, would be used to use some Docker registry.
Right. Because I was earlier version, I haven't spent that much time on this one. I was getting Liquibase errors, when I was when I had transferred, when I had moved my database, dumped all my entire database in OpenMRSDB, and then did a compose up again. Then I was getting Liquibase errors because I think there was some inconsistency with the concepts in the database versus what is in the config for what Liquibase.
Yeah. So use your own database, use your own configurations, load up your configurations by volume mount, and you should.
I'll try the volume mount. Yeah, I think
there is also source code reference in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Mohan, how much do we have left to cover?
We have the demo left, Anju.
Okay, all right. Thank you. So I hope others are okay to continue for some more time.
Right, I'll take the rest, I guess. And thanks, Ashok, for the listing. Right, so we'll head over back to the slide. Right, and we'll start off with the demo. So this demo would be mostly focused on the restoration part of the backup. So as Anshu just mentioned, if you are someone who has been working with Bahmni for so long and you have your own set of concepts and that data migrate, this is how you can get it done. And for that, you can first head over to this. So for that, you can head over to the upgrade wiki. I'll copy it here and I'll just paste it here in chat as well. All right, and this gives you an overall idea on how to upgrade from an earlier CentOS version to a Bahmni standard or on Lite for Docker. So to get started, we have the common backup artifacts. So if you hit over here, so here if you see we have the common backup artifacts to be extracted from existing Bahmni installations, covering all components of Bahmni along with the commands to generate the default credentials. We have a detailed guide on how to get this done here. So this was an earlier session that was conducted, I think, a couple of months ago, and I'll link it here. So if you can head over to this drive, and you will be able to see the restoration in action. So one of our trainers have the whole system backed up and restored. So we'll, for brevity's sake, we have the backup ready with us, and let me just quickly walk you through how to restore this to a new environment. And for that, let me just head over to my terminal. Right, and we don't need this anymore.
Yeah, while you get there, maybe I can just add on a point here. Yeah, so
Sure.
on the backup part, so there is a specific directory structure that Rahul is going to cover, and you might get a question, okay, my implementation doesn't have a few of these services already running. As an example, you may not be running packs or you may not be running OpenLS. So if that is your case, you can skip those specific artifacts. You can take whatever components that you have been using before and arrange it in the specific directory structure. So the restore script is written in that way, so that if a specific artifact with that specific name is not found, then the restore would not happen for that specific component. Yeah, you can continue.
So this is the backup folder structure that Mohan was referring to. For more details, you can head over to this URL and you will find the details in here. Back to the restore. Right, so let me just quickly SSH into an environment that we have for the demo. Right, so I am in. Right, and for better understanding, let me just show you guys how I have the backup ready. So here inside Bahmni backup, I have the backup ready with me. I had run the backup script a while earlier, and I have the backup files ready. So you can see the SQL dumps and the other related folders. Now, if I head over back to Bahmni standard,
Rahul, should be slash home.
Yes. Right. So with that, let me just open my env folder. So this is an important step that you have to cover when you are doing the restoration. So here in my env file, let me just quickly head over to the doc as well. So here, if you see, we have mentioned a couple of variables that is crucial in getting the new restoration done. So this would be by default set to the defaults that we have on our environments. So let me just quickly show you a couple of them. So here, if you see the T that does set UTC, you can set it to whatever time zone you are comfortable with. And then we have the image tags. So OpenMRS, OpenLS, Odoo, Odoo 10, Odoo DB, and both the name, user, and password for OpenMRS. All of these has been configured to work with what we have. That is what the Bahmni basically has. Just let me just right. So here, if you see the OpenLS DB image, right now points to Bahmni / OpenLS DB 1.0.0 standard beta. So this has this image that we published has some data in it, so that we can this data is specifically configured for the community, and this has some data in it so that the community can play around with it and see how Bahmni works. And by switching these values, the implementer can start with a fresh DB instance. So let me just quickly change these values. So this would be the OpenLS DB image. And let me just switch it to Postgres 9.6.
Yeah, so just reiterating, so this is very crucial because these images that are already available comes published with the database backup to help implementers to get quickly started with a pre-configured database and Bahmni Docker. So now if you are bringing your own backup, in cases where the implementations have already Bahmni running, and if you are bringing your own backup, so this step is very important. So that the database containers start with a fresh database with no data within it. Because if it has a backup already, so when the image boots up, automatically the restoration from that backup happens. So that's why maybe at few times you may face, okay, there is data, database is not empty, and the restore script would throw you an error. So this step is very important. And then also the time zone. So specifically on the time zone, for example, Bahmni uses appointment scheduling and there is time zones that are configured. So now maybe your existing instance could be running on a different time zone and you could have configured it to run at, say, a specific time zone. Now, if by default, the behavior of Docker is that Docker runs every containers under UTC time zone. So if that happens, then you may see that there are few differences in the times that you see across appointments or even at the OT scheduling, wherever we show the timestamps. So that is also very important, that what is your existing server's time zone? Because all your database backups, MySQL backup doesn't store any time zone information specifically, just stores the timestamp. So that's very important, so that you set your time zone first, the compose environment variable, so that the containers that spins up after restore also runs on the same time zone, so that you would not end up with any time zone conflicts or a different time being rendered for existing appointments.
Right. And just to reiterate, as Mohan had earlier mentioned, we with this standard release, we are focusing more on the, we'll be shipping with MySQL 8.0 for the OpenMRS DB image. This has been covered earlier, and I'm just reiterating that. So I think I've changed most of what I want to, except for TZ. TZ, I'll set it to UTC for now, and I'll go ahead and save all of this. That is up in, that is now saved. And right, so let me just now quickly run the restore script. And as I earlier discussed, I have the restore script here inside /Bahmni underscore backup. So, and I also have
Rahul,
the
before
restore.
you trigger the restore script, can you see if there are any running containers?
Right, yes. So as I just said, let me just quickly check if I have any running containers. Yes, we don't have any running containers successfully. So we'll just start with the restore. And since I don't have any running containers, the restore script it'll take up the backup and start new containers with this backup. So let us just quickly try that out as well. Right. Right. This might take a couple of minutes. In the meantime, let me just quickly walk you through the script and what it does. So if you head over to Bahmni Docker, so this is right. So if you head over to Bahmni Docker, inside the standard folder, you will see a couple of scripts files. We have two script files of importance right now. One would be the Bahmni's backup Bahmni standard, which is this one. And what the script forms a comprehensive backup for a Bahmni Docker setup. This sources the utility function. This setting up the backup folder path and creates a subfolder within with the current date and time. So this is this part you'll have to do some tweaking because Bahmni by default sets the subfolder with the current date and time. You have to take up all these files from the current date and time folder subfolder and put it inside this Bahmni restore folder. And then what it does is it defines the path for database backup files. And then it backs up various databases, MySQL and PostgreSQL using specific credentials, backing up specific directories from multiple containers to the backups folder. And then the second script of importance would be the restore Bahmni standard. And on this one, the script restores back the database backup that we just took with the backup Bahmni standard, and then restores it to the file system volumes for Bahmni Docker setup. So what it specifically does is it sources utility functions and the environment variables. So here you can see that it by default looks for the .tnb file, and all these configurations have to be inside the .tnb file, or you have to switch it to say if you're keen on using a .env.dev file, then do update it here. And then it validates the input restore artifact path, sets up paths for database backup files, and then restores various databases using specific credentials, and initiates the file system registration via the Docker Compose. So this is a quick overview of both the restore and the backup script. Let's just head over back to the environment. Okay, this like I said, it might take take a couple of minutes. One is the so we are done with the OpenMRS DB backup. We now have the reports happening, reports DB backup happening. Any questions in the meantime? And just to give you a quick heads up, so Ashok, as you asked for, this is the yes moment.
This is Movin Parvez and I am from Bangladesh.
Okay.
Currently, we are working, we are implemented around 50 plus hospitals, and there we are running Bahmni 0.93 with using the Odoo. Recently, we have tried to Dockerize, but facing some issues. Bahmni standard, from Bahmni standard, we have running it, no problem. But previously, which we are used, like our databases, around 3 years data are stored there. We want to migrate those data into Bahmni standard. So facing some issues there. Already we have communicated with the community, but still facing some issue. Around 90% we have completed. I hope we'll complete it.
Sure.
Great, that's great to hear if you're already trying the migration. So Mumin, are you facing issues on Odoo?
No, not Odoo. Basically, we work on CentOS 7.6 in our physical server, and in our development phase, we use Vagrant.
Okay.
After the installation of Bahmni 0.93, we use base dump database. When the installation is completed, we use two directories, which is config folder. One is config folder and another is Bahmni apps folder. In our country, we are using BD UHC config and Bahmni apps. OpenMRS module Bahmni apps. These two folder we are stored in the Vagrant folder where we installed, and then Symlink.
Right.
This was the procedure of our development and as well as our production grade. But now we are facing some difficulties as we are also new in Docker.
Yeah,
Right,
so
is there
I
any,
hope. Yeah, from what I understand, Mumin, I think your implementation uses a custom version of Bahmni apps. So if that is the case, then you first need to look into how you can build a custom image of Bahmni app. So that's available on the Bahmni apps repo. There is a GitHub Actions workflow available.
Yeah.
There is a Docker file available with which you can build your custom image. And you can also, as now Rahul is showing, you can restore your existing database backups and you should be up and running. If you face any struggles, please add the details, post it on a talk thread, and let's see how it can be resolved.
Yeah, thank you.
And this is the Bahmni apps folder that repo that Mohan just referenced, and you can find the package Docker file here inside package/docker/docker file, and there is a GitHub workflow that is also associated. So yeah, you can head over to GitHub/workflows and check inside build and publish. So this would give you a quick basic workflow to build the Bahmni apps and publish it to your registry of choice.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Yeah, and adding to that, we have another session lined up. I think it's the day after. I think we have it on Thursday, where we talk about the development setup. How do you build the front end image? How do you build the backend custom module and different steps? So could also stay tuned to join there.
Yeah, of course. We are trying to attend all the session.
Right. Thank you.
Sure. Like I said, this might take a couple of minutes. Sorry to keep you all waiting. This the restore goes through each of the containers and sets up the backup, restores the backup into these DB containers. So might take a minute or more.
Okay, another question.
Sure.
Okay. when in Bahmni 0.93, we used to put the dump database at etc Bahmni installer and deployment artifacts. We usually put the database there, and then the final command was run. But now my question is, at the time of restoring right now, where should I put my three databases like OpenMRS, OpenLEs, or Odoo database?
Okay, thanks for bringing that up, Moment. So, as I briefly explained it here while going through the session, I hope I'm audible.
Yeah.
So, what you can do is here, when you do the backup, when you take up the backup, only thing you have to be mindful of would be the structure of how you put the folders in. So, this is the basic backup folder structure. Remember to stick to this structure and the file name. So, if you are planning on changing the file names, you'll have to also change it on the backup restore script. So that is one part, and the other part is that restore. When you run the restore script, the only thing that you have to be only thing you'll have to worry about would be the path. You have to provide the absolute path to which where you have all this Bahmni slash backup folder set in. So if you have say Bahmni slash backup in your downloads folder, remember when you give this when you run the script inside Bahmni standard, when you run the script, be sure to provide the absolute path for that folder, for the backup folder, as an argument when you run this script. So an example would be this. So here, if you see, I've run the script, the restore Bahmni standard script, and this the backup folder was not actually inside the standard folder itself. It was actually inside the root of the container, root of the instance. So this part, I hope that answers your question.
Okay, got it.
Right. So only thing you have to be mindful of is to provide the absolute path for the as an argument.
Okay.
Right. And yes, with that we have all the containers up and running, and you can see that we have a couple of errors. It is because we didn't have a backup for upload results reports in DC. And to validate this, we'll just quickly run a Docker PS. So earlier we didn't have any containers up and running. So ideally, right now we should have a couple of containers running. Yes, so you can see that 4 minutes ago I had created these containers, one for these containers with the DB backup. So I think we are good on that front. And as a next step, let's just bring up our EMR profile. So this would have a couple of our services and just the bare minimum. So since it's a demo, I'm only focusing on bringing up the EMR profile. So let me just quickly run this command. So this command, what it does is it brings up all the profiles, all the services that has been tagged with this EMR profile on detached mode. Right. So you can see that config SMS token, Bahmni web proxy appointments, OpenMRS DB, IPD, OpenMRS Bahmni config, and patient dashboard and implementer interface. All of these services has been brought up. Let's just do another Docker PS just to validate this. Right, we have all the containers up. So this would take about a minute to get all of this up. So in the meantime, do you have any questions? So right now, OpenMRS would be booting up and would be going through the Liquibase and other necessary steps before letting us in. So any questions in the meantime?
Yeah, I just want to add on here. So when you are also doing the migration, the general recommendation that we provide is, so go step by step. Once you restore all the databases, don't start all the services of Bahmni, like directly don't use the Bahmni standard profile. Instead, you can start step by step, like say, okay, first bring up the EMR profile, validate all your patient's data, other configurations, Bahmni dashboard configurations, everything is mounted properly, works fine. Once you are confident enough, okay, I have my EMR pieces up and running, then proceed to the next component, maybe either lab or it could be Odoo or it could be PAX. So that it would give you a sense, okay, what has happened with the restore, which service is breaking. So that would help you, like let's say if you face any trouble, fine tune it quickly, figure out the root cause, okay, this component, this backup file, can I start from fresh? So yeah, that's something a tip I would like to add on here.
Sure. Thanks, Mohan. And just another call out. So we have this other script which could be very useful when you're new to Docker and the whole setup. So we have this Bahmni run Bahmni.sh script. So if you are inside either standard or light, just run this script. It will give you a set of options which includes starting all the containers, stopping all the containers, bringing down all the containers along with the volumes, and also the logs, and pulling all the images, and then it also lets you see all the logs. So I just used the script while Mohan was giving the Mohan was talking. So this is also an important script that you can make use of. Right. Now I can see that the change sets are all running, and in a minute, I hope OpenMRS would also be up. Right, I can see that OpenMRS is up. Let me just hit this URL so that I can see the environment in action. And we have Bahmni up and running, and ideally this is a fresh instance, and it should not, if not for the backup, it shouldn't have any data in it. But let's just see. Since we have a backup, this should have at least one patient in it. Let's just open clinical. Right, and we have the Bahmni training patient added. This was added just for the demo purpose, and you can see that all the data is there. So the vitals of the patient documents that were uploaded, all of this are still available because of the backup script that we ran and because of the backup that we just restored into this environment. I hope that gives you a quick understanding of how the backup and restore works. And let's just run a couple of commands just to validate all of this. So let me just exec into the OpenMRS DB. Let me just open MySQL and run a few commands just to give you an idea of all the data that we have right now. And let me just show you all the tables. And I ran show tables, and it gave me a list of all the tables, about 246 tables. And then let me see all the procedures that we have inside the DB. Right. Any questions there? So I hope this gave you a quick brief overview of how to get the DB backup and restore done.
So the restore cleans up the demo database, is it? And then copies the, the one that you have created with one user, one client, like, one patient.
Right. Yes, yes. So as I mentioned earlier, you'll have to change the image tag. So if you see here, the OpenMRS image is not that of the demo DBs. We are booting to a fresh instance. So that's why I don't have any earlier data. I don't have any test data, demo data in my environment, and it's just the one patient.
Okay.
Right. So for anyone who's planning on doing this, yes, Ashok.
I guess it creates the database and then copies the MySQL backup, right?
Right.
Yeah, sure. The step would be, first it would create the database with the credentials. Then when you run the restore script, it reads from the backup file and dumps that backup file into the OpenMRS database.
That's it. Okay.
Yeah. Right. And for anyone who's planning on doing the migration, this is a critical step. So be mindful of not skipping this one. Two things to be mindful when you're doing the migration. One is to have the DB backup in this particular structure. The script for the restore works specifically with this structure in place. And the second part would be to set up the config. So this is the part where I went inside I opened my en.env file and started changing a couple of those values. So by default, we ship with the demo DB images, and these would have some test data in it so that the community can play around with it. But if you're an implementer, if you want to start without any backlogs, any of those test demo data, you have to switch to these images instead before the restore is done. I can maybe take up another question. Anything else? Right. I think with that I'll stop sharing. I think we are a bit over time. I mean, we are on time actually, since. So we can take one last question. Any questions that the community want to ask? Anything that's been bugging you regarding the migration, the restore and DB backups?
I just wish you had a Windows version of the script files too, you know. I mean, that's maybe a tall order, but I mean, you guys may be using
Unix-based
Macs,
system,
right? Where
yes.
But most of our Docker, at least been working with on the Windows installations. So maybe something that we can think of in the future.
Yeah, sure, Ashok. Fine, noted. Maybe right now, since for production upgrades, since we are recommending Ubuntu, we went with the Bash script. But yeah, slowly, maybe for the next release, we can think of adding Windows supported command files. Yeah.
Command scripts, right? Yeah.
Right. And an easier step would be to like copy the existing scripts and then use a ChatGPT maybe to convert it to Windows supported.
Yeah, I was thinking of that, something like that.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
But it never works, right?
Thank you all.
ChatGPT is.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Yeah, amazing. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining. Please do test out the migrations. Post if
Absolutely.
you find anything. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you all for joining. Have a great day.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Right. And the moment if you have any questions, maybe you can join the community and post your questions. I think you're already there in the community, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Take care.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.